Guys, I'm literally not kidding. How has it been almost a year since this movie came out in the States? Like, what is time? What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel and to another video, and today I'm going to be reacting to your Infinity Castle hot takes. A few weeks ago I posted on my YouTube community tab asking y'all for your most hot take from the Infinity Castle movie, and I got 165 responses. Y'all love to talk about your hot takes. So I'm gonna read through some of them and tell you if I agree or disagree. Now, hot takes can tend to get a little bit toxic on the internet. I'm going to do my best to keep my responses very respectful because I definitely promote a non-toxic environment, and I do ask that y'all keep it that way in the comments below. Now, if you are a consistent subscriber, you might be wondering where Infinity Castle Part 3 is, as in my video where I'm discussing the movie that came out last year in length. And let's just say I'm having issue after issue getting that video done, and I actually am going to have to completely re-record everything because of some files getting corrupted. And for the record, my original recording was almost 3 hours long. I'm actually doing this on my lunch break, so I only have roughly an hour to do this. I should be able to record it Friday night and get it to y'all by Saturday. That's the goal. So I apologize for the delay. I just wanted to get a video out to y'all today. But we're gonna dive right in. Like I said, I'm on my lunch break, so I only have about an hour to record this, so I am not going to get through all 165 of you, and I will also say a lot of y'all repeated kind of the same hot take, but I need to take a deep breath because I read through some of these and some of y'all, you're trying to get on my nerves, I can tell. But we're gonna dive right in, but before we do, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment your thoughts. If you want access to fun perks like early release of videos, fun emojis, and helping me decide what videos to make every week, you can join my channel membership. For a small monthly fee, you get access to those perks and more, and you get to help support my dream of becoming a full-time content creator. So if you are interested, hit the join button below. Also, I just hit 20K on Instagram, which is crazy. I turned 30 in less than a month. Help me get to 30K by my 30th birthday by following me on Instagram in my bio. I don't know why I did it that way. That was kind of weird. Let's get into it. All right, coming in at our first hot take. Kaigaku is a filler upper moon. I agree. I think Kaigaku is an interesting character, but for the most part, he was kind of meh to me. I think there's a greater conversation to be had about him representing what most of humanity would do, that his entire shtick is survival that turns into something much more than that. Like, it turns into having no regard for other people's lives anymore. So there's a lot to be said about Kaigaku, but I still agree, especially because they couldn't even make him upper 5. Like, there's literally no upper 5 in the Infinity Castle because he wasn't good enough to get that rank. He had to be upper 6. So when Zenitsu was like, you seem to be pretty happy for filling upper 6 role just as a stopgap, he was not wrong, and honestly one of Zenitsu's best lines. Alright, Giyu and Tanjiro did not kill Akaza. He self-destructed. It's not the same thing. So I would like to throw out there that this has 13 replies on it. I've talked about this in length in my short form content, so yes. Okay, in one hand I agree. So Tanjiro and Giyu, yes, they did not kill Akaza, but Akaza did not kill Akaza. He self-destructed and then he started regenerating, which kind of puts the idea that like Tanjiro and Giyu didn't do anything, it was all Akaza, kind of in a different light. So what I always tell people is, no, Tanjiro and Giyu did not kill Akaza. There was no way for them to do that, because even then, if they like somehow got him in the sunlight, they still wouldn't have technically killed him. They would have just gotten him into the sunlight and the sun would have done it. But they did defeat him. In fact, Akaza even admits defeat in the movie, and that is what led him to finally disintegrating and stopping his regeneration. If Tanjiro had not sliced Akaza's head off in the way that he did, by doing it, you know, like the way he called out to him before and everyone laughed at him because he could have just done it from behind and Akaza would have never known. If he had done it that way, I don't think Akaza would have accepted defeat. Because he called out to him, Akaza knew he was there and he still couldn't figure out what Tanjiro was doing, and Tanjiro was able to cut his head off very easily once he went into the transparent world and selfless state. That's what defeated Akaza. It just didn't physically kill him because Akaza was able to, like, kind of become something else, like he's evolving. I believe Tanjiro and Gyu deserve their flowers for what they did. I think Gyu did play a huge role in that as well, because Tanjiro would not have been able to analyze the fight the way he did if Gyu had not been taking on a majority of the physical fight. I always say Gyu clearly is trying to keep Akaza's attention away from Tanjiro for a majority of the fight. He is aware that Tanjiro is able to hold his own because he was able to recognize his strength at the beginning of the fight and say, like, he's the level of a Hashira, but he still tried to keep Akaza away from Tanjiro as much as he could and take on the brunt of that physical fight. Tanjiro analyzes a lot more, which Gyu knows from the day they met that he's really good at analyzing the fight. So Tanjiro was able to analyze, he was able to figure out how to access the transparent world, and thus that is the thing that defeated Akaza, along with their strength and their, Tanjiro's heart and him reminding him of Keizo and this sort of thing. There's so much more to it than just, well, they didn't kill him. So segueing away from that, Tanjiro yelling to Akaza about killing him was the right decision. Yes, absolutely. I recently explained this in a short form video, but essentially what happened is, as we saw with Tanjiro, which is Tanjiro's dad, a lot of people, every time I say Tanjiro, someone's like, his name's Tanjiro, not Tanjiro. I'm like, his dad. His dad is Tanjiro. He is Tanjiro. There's a difference. Anyway, when his dad beheads that bear, he specifically, like, makes his presence known by talking to him. While Tanjiro was already in the transparent world when he called out to Akaza, I think that is really what kind of activated the selfless state, was making his presence known there. And then we go into Akaza's backstory and we learn that he hates cowards because of the way Koyuki and Keizo were killed, where the people of the dojo poisoned the well. So, they did it when he wasn't looking and that sort of thing. So he considers, like, a sneak attack to be cowardly. So I think personally, if Tanjiro had beheaded him from behind, we as an audience know that that's normal in battle. That is a tactic that can be totally usable when you need to. Even Gyu wanted him to do that, right? Like, we know Akaza's morals are what caused him to end up disintegrating. So if Tanjiro had beheaded him from behind, I don't think he would have accepted defeat in the way that he did with Tanjiro calling out to him and then being able to behead him without Akaza being able to fight back. So I totally agree with this one. Okay, so next is, I thought Akaza's backstory took up too much time. I know it's important, but it could have been at least a bit shorter. I don't know if this is a hot take or not. So I would say this isn't a hot take because this is definitely the thing I've heard the most. Ever since the movie came out, there have been people that are like, it was half backstory, the backstory was just so long. Even some of my friends were like, Akaza's backstory is kind of long. And I, agree with this. Akaza's backstory is long, maybe a little bit longer than it needs to be. However, now that it is on streaming, you can actually look at the timestamps. And I want to throw out there that from the time it starts to the time the major chunk of it ends and we go back to the battle, and from there on out, it's not really backstory. There's just a few things that happen, like he sees Koyuki and Keizo and his dad and Muzan as he's kind of trying to fade away. It was only 25 minutes. So about the length of one episode, which is still long. Yes, it is still the longest backstory I think we've had so far. However, I don't think it's as long as people make it out to be, because it does feel longer because it's much slower paced, but I don't think that it's too long. I think sure they could have shortened it a tiny bit, but I don't think that's really necessary. There wasn't really much else they could do with the movie length anyway, so why not extend it a little bit more? But Akaza's backstory is really I feel like it's kind of the cultivation of all of the demon backstories that we've gotten so far. We've gotten a lot of demon backstories. We've also gotten quite a few demons that haven't really had a backstory. I feel like there's a good balance, and most of the ones who have a backstory, it's pretty sad. But I would say that as the show progressed, it definitely got sadder and sadder. And Akaza's kind of is the pillar of a sad demon backstory, and I think it's really important for us to understand his background. And there's so much nuance within it too that I won't dive into. So I half agree, sure, it didn't need to be as long as it was, but it didn't take away my enjoyment out of the movie, personally. Okay, next one is Zenitsu's victory not being announced was odd, as Shinobu's death and Tanjiro and Gyu's victory were announced. Okay, I've never really thought about this. I guess it's because, and people always come for me when I say this, Zenitsu is not my favorite character. I do love him very, very much. I just love a lot of the other characters more. Personally, that's just my preference. So I've never really thought about it. I do think, sure, we should have gotten the announcement. I think it would have been really interesting to see Tanjiro's response to hearing that his friend, who he does kind of perceive as a scaredy cat, you know, throughout the story, we do see that Zenitsu kind of pushes Tanjiro's buttons a little bit more than the average character. We even see, like, at the beginning of Tsuzumi Mansion, when he met him, he gets, like, generally quite angry at him to the point of knocking him out by the end of that arc. So I think it would have been really fun to see his response, that his friend, who he's always believed in, but like he believes in Zenitsu 100%. He knows that he can do it, but he's like not really sure how he's gonna make it. I think that would have been really cool to see at least his response. And yeah, give Zenitsu his... I don't think there's like a real reason for them to not include it. I don't think there's a real reason they didn't include it. It could have just been a detail that they decided to leave out. Who knows? But yeah, Zenitsu getting that would have been cool. So I guess I agree. All right, so this one is, I'm gonna call this not a hot take because this is probably, with Akaza's backstory being too long, the other most common critique I've seen of this movie. Personally, I thought the pacing of the movie was bad. This is a hard thing to answer because I personally did not see the whole, it was just episodes pasted together and it should have just been a season. As someone who genuinely would have loved for it to be a season, when it was first getting announced that it was going to be a movie trilogy, if you go back and look at my videos, I was actually more leaning towards a trilogy being more not what I wanted. Like, yes, it is amazing to see it on the big screen, and I very much understand why we are getting this as a movie trilogy, because it is a very big and bombastic and grand ending to the show. As a manga reader, I know what is to come, and I think that it makes sense to make these a movie, but I also kind of miss the week-to-week excitement as a YouTuber. If the season was like a 25 episode season, there was gonna be a lot more content available to me than just like the movie coming out, I made a few reviews, and then I had to wait until it was streaming before I could really talk about it in detail because I couldn't just access it easily without going to an illegal website, which I don't do, and I never support that decision ever. This doesn't really answer the hot take though. So about the pacing, I think it's hard because they're not doing... I saw a lot of people try and compare it to like Lord of the Rings, where Lord of the Rings, each movie was an unfinished story, but the movie felt like it had a good start, beginning, and end. This one didn't really feel that way, which I understand. I personally would say that you can't really compare it to Lord of the Rings because they are adapting a manga instead of a novel. I'm fairly certain in Lord of the Rings, each movie adapted one novel. If I'm remembering correctly, I'm not that much into Lord of the Rings, so feel free to correct me on that. But the way the novels are made kind of have more of a start, middle, and end. The Infinity Castle arc are just chapters, right? So there's not that beginning, middle, and end. Also, they are adapting it almost one-to-one to the manga. The Lord of the Rings trilogy doesn't get a specific one-to-one adaptation. It's a lot more like they're taking a lot more liberty. So anyway, I think the pacing is what the pacing was. Was it perfect? No. I would definitely say, now that I've watched it a few times, like there's a couple times where I'm like, all right, get on with it, you know, like that sort of thing. We're doing a lot of talking and that sort of thing, but it's always been like that, and every anime is like that. I think if any other anime did this, it would feel the exact same way. So it doesn't really bother me. I don't think it's bad. I think it's just a product of the fact that it's only part one in a 3-part series, and they are not building it in a way to make each movie have a good, like, beginning, middle, and end. They're just more saying, like, hey, this is the end of the movie, hang tight, here, the second one's coming out in a few years, right? And I think that's just what they chose to do. So it's a preference, in my opinion, that people wanted them to adapt it a lot differently, which they were not going to do. So anyway, I don't think I'm really answering the question. I don't think I agree that the pacing was bad. No, I know. I don't agree that the pacing is bad. I agree that it could have been better, but I don't think it was bad. I don't think it was like a bunch of episodes mixed into one. and I think that it was a really good movie that kept my attention from start to finish, personally. So this person submitted a few. I'm gonna go with their... I'm gonna talk about, I think, their first one and their last one, because their last one is just kind of funny. The first one is Doma's backstory was badly placed. I actually kind of agree with this. So that's where it is in the manga. First of all, it is placed there. However, in the anime, they added all of the fight sequence leading up to that was anime original. So what I didn't like about where they placed Doma's backstory was actually the fact that right as it started, the beat of the music was getting really, like, solid, and the striking of the sword was, like, on beat with the music. So I was sitting there in the theater and I was like this, and then it was just like, and backstory, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, it kind of, like, I got super excited, and then it was just taken away from me after, like, 3 seconds. So it is where it is in the manga. I think that is still, like, not terribly placed. I just think that the way they animated it was like, huh, this kind of took me out of the moment for a moment. So I also don't care about Doma. Every time his backstory would start, I'd be like, get on with it. Like, get over yourself. You're fine. Okay, so the last one that they did was when Tanjiro says the strong exist to protect the weak, then the weak grow strong and protect those weaker than themselves. That is the law of nature. Tanjiro looked ugly. No, he didn't. He looked... I remember thinking, like, oh wow, they're making Tanjiro look so regal and beautiful. Like, beautiful as in it's beautifully animated. For the record, Tanjiro is a child and I'm a 30-year-old woman. I'm not saying beautiful as in, like, oh, he's so hot. Like, it's Tanjiro. That's my son. I just felt like the lighting and everything with the orange glow from his background was really pretty, so I disagree with that. But I just thought that was funny. Like, okay. All right. This one is a boiling hot take because I have yet to see anyone feel this way. This person said, I cared about the Akaza fight and backstory the least out of all the Infinity Castle fights. Of course I loved it, but I just enjoyed the other battles more. On top of that, I didn't care about his backstory as much either. It's hard to explain, but I just feel like I cared more about the other Upper Moons because of their connection to other important characters. Akaza killed Kyojiro, and Tanjiro really didn't like them. It was a negative connection, so I couldn't care as much as you could others. Of course, I think Akaza's backstory is beautifully written, and he's designed very well. I don't hate him, I just don't really care as much as others. I think this is fine. Like, this is, again, just your preference, and you're allowed to have a preference and allowed to have favorites from the movie. Definitely don't feel like I've seen too many people say they cared about this fight the least. I feel like most people say that they really got into the movie when this fight started. I will throw out there, I find it interesting in this comment that you comment specifically that the connection between Tanjiro and Akaza is negative when it's the same with Zenitsu and Kaigaku and Shinobu and Doma. So I don't see how that's really different. I think that the Akaza fight is widely seen as everyone's favorite because it had the most time of all of the fights in the movie. I mean, when you think about it, the Shinobu fight isn't done, so that one feels like we can't really have too much of an opinion on yet because we haven't seen it end. The Zenitsu fight is very short, but really good, and then the Akaza fight is a lot longer with a lot more big moments. But the biggest thing is that the Akaza fight is not just about the character connection, it's about the audience connection, because we also feel connection to wanting to kill Akaza because we all saw it happen in Mugen Train when Kaigaku and Doma we really haven't known until now. So that's why I think it means so much to other people. You are perfectly reasonable in your preferences, but that's just my take on what you said. I have a few that I'm going through that have manga spoilers, so I am going to put those at the end so I can have like a good stopping place for manga or non-manga readers to stop. Okay, leaving right before Akaza appeared before Tanjiro was a good decision. It led us to see Urokodaki tending to Nezuko, and his speech was not only incredibly moving on its own, but hyped up Tanjiro versus Akaza even more. Agreed. I didn't even know people disliked that right after the Akaza scream from Tanjiro, we went to Muzan and Tamayo and then Urokodaki. I believe that's how it is in the manga, so that doesn't bother me at all. I think that it was perfectly set up the way it needed to be set up, and it was good, so I agree. This kind of segues from what I said earlier about Kaigaku, so I'm just going to read a part of this hot take. I know Kaigaku is supposed to be scum, but I kind of feel bad for him. He was handled the worst cards ever at every turn and just did what he had to do in order to not die. Agreed. I do think Kaigaku is still a victim. I think Gotoge very specifically chose to not show his backstory because they wanted the audience to feel hatred towards him. If we had seen his backstory, I think we would have felt the same about him as we did about Akaza, honestly. It seems like he was just trying to survive at every turn, and that turned into a little bit of a, hey, you're taking it too far, and being like happy with people dying that don't recognize your worth or anything like that, but he still is very much a victim. And I will say, they don't really say it in here, but I'm sure someone said it at some point. What would you have done if you had to fight Upper Moon 1 and they offered to let you survive if you become a demon? I think if you're being real with yourself, most of us are gonna say, I'll turn into a demon. Especially with what he had gone through leading up to that. Personally, I think that's more realistic than the people who are like, I will not turn into a demon. Most of us as humans are going to go the route of survival. That's it. After Shinobu's death announcement, I wish the focus had been more on the Hashira's reactions rather than Tanjiro's. This is especially true for Gyomei since he was canonically a father figure to Shinobu and Kanai in the One-Winged Butterfly light novel. I totally understand that Tanjiro is the main character, but I truly think it would have been more impactful to see how the Hashira reacted instead. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but I think we have to understand that, like you said, Tanjiro is the main character. We are seeing the story from his eyes, so when we are low on time, we're going to focus on him, and that's just that. I don't know if I agree or disagree with this one as a Tanjiro stan, so I'll just say, sure, it would have been interesting to add Gyomei into the mix for sure, but I don't think that really changed the story to me. My hot take is it was good, but I am not excited for the next one. I feel ya. I am very excited for the next one, but I'm also very not. That one flashback of Tanjiro and Tanjiro was still meaningful, even though Tanjiro goes through a lot of random flashbacks and the fandom makes jokes about it. Agreed. If you've gone this far in the story and you're still like super upset over flashbacks, why are you still watching? This story is built on flashbacks. Like, if you don't like it, then you don't like it. That's fine, but don't watch a story that's been built upon flashbacks since the very beginning and then complain about the flashbacks when it happens. I just don't understand that thought process, so I agree with this hot take. It was a very meaningful scene. And I will also remind people, the way anime time works is Tanjiro was not just standing there for as long as we saw the backstory. He was standing there for like a couple of seconds. Like, it wasn't that big of a deal before you're like, well, that's just a weird like reason for them to make it make sense. That's what every anime does. I've been watching One Piece, y'all, and that happens a lot. So I'm just saying. My hot take is that Shinobu isn't weak. She's strong in her own way, given her ability to make a poison powerful enough to kill upper rank demons. Agreed. I hardcore agree with this. People have taken the idea that she is too weak to behead a demon as that means that she is in general weak, when this story over and over and over again shows that usually the person who is strong of mind, as in smart, analytical, overcomes the person who is strong physically. So technically, if we're going that route, Shinobu's the strongest. So I'm just throwing that out there. I wish we got more Mitsuri rather than Mitsuri being defended by Obanai. That's probably the only part I disliked about the movie. She's a Hashira and she's like powerful. Her sword is super cool and so is she. Let her fight. Okay, I agree. This is probably one of my biggest critiques of the story as a whole and Ufotable's adaptation is how Mitsuri has been handled from the beginning. So this scene that we're talking about in this movie is anime original, I believe. And I agree. I was like, why not? I understand the point of Obanai being like the super protective boyfriend, right? Like he is in love with her, so he's like, stay away from Kanroji, you scum, right? I get that, but also let her fight. It's not like she's a non-ranked demon slayer with no abilities. Like, she is incredibly strong and her fighting style is incredibly cool. So I do agree. When I saw that scene, I was like, let her fight too. Like, why are we just making her the damsel in distress when we've established how incredibly strong she is? She's a Hashira. Let her fight. That I've felt kind of that way since we were introduced to her. I do feel like Swords and Village, for example, all of Muichiro's scenes got extended and none of hers did. And then in Hashira Training, Tengen got a super extended training scene, Muichiro got a super extended training scene, and then Mitsuri got no extended scene. Like, you start to see a pattern, and it's very frustrating, and I say this as someone who will go to battle for Demon Slayer against the people that say it's not written well. There are still critiques within the show that I have, and the way Mitsuri is handled, again, by both Gotoge Sensei and UFO Table does frustrate me, for sure. So I do agree with this one. Okay. My hot take is that Zenitsu should have died in the fight with Kaigaku. I mean, as someone who's not necessarily a Zenitsu shooter, I can say I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, I also see why they didn't, so I think it would have made an interesting plot point to kill him off. It would have been like, oh my gosh, like, Shinobu dies, and then Zenitsu dies, and we would be like, oh my god, are they gonna kill off Gyu? Like, I think it would have just been too much at the very beginning, so I understand where you're coming from. I think there's a lot of times in the story where I'm like, this character could have died here, and I don't think I would have been that upset. But I also see why they went the route that they did, because it is about Zenitsu overcoming the fact that Kaigaku was always, like, better than him. So, personally, I get it. Do I agree? Probably not, but I see where you're coming from. Kanao should have gotten more screen time. She always gets the shorthand, as we saw everyone fall in their whereabouts, plus who they were with and what they were doing. Literally the only other character we didn't see in the start is Kanao. It just would have been better if we saw her fall in and what she was doing, such as her looking for Shinobu like Genya was looking for Sanemi. I agree. Why didn't she get an anime original moment like every other character did? Again, kind of similar to Mitsuri. I can put two and together and figure out why this happens, and it frustrates the hell out of me, but I do think that Kanao deserved so much more in Hashira training with all the anime original time that they had. They could have added her in a lot more, and also I agree, why did every single character get anime original content at the beginning of this movie except for her? I agree. My hot take is that the transparent world visually didn't make any sense in the movie. Why was Tanjiro floating in space? The manga was more straightforward and less mystical. I think, like, when I first saw it, I was a little bit like, this is not the way that it was in the manga, but I actually liked how they visualized it in the movie. I don't really have a reason why. I just thought it was really cool that they explained it like it was an out-of-body experience. I do think, I think there's, like, an actual legitimate reason why they did this. I think because in the manga, they show him literally being able to just see their muscles and their organs and everything. I think they did this to make it a little bit more, not NSFW. I think it would have been really hard for them to make it not be, like, explicit in the way that it was in the manga, because in the manga it's only like one page, it's one frame. In the anime there's movement, there's multiple frames, so I think they simply did this to make it a little bit less explicit. Like, that's personally how I saw it, and I really liked that they went that route. I thought it was really cool, the music was cool, the animation was amazing, and I personally thought that scene was really, really well done. I understand where you're coming from, but I do disagree with this one. My hot take is the reason that people were so bothered with the amount of flashbacks in this movie were because a lot of them were narrated flashbacks instead of living in the moment. I feel the parts that weren't narrated were more interesting than the ones that were just like Shinobu explaining her past, or Doma, or half of Akaza's backstory. Obviously, this follows the manga 1-to-1, which has a ton of narrative talk, but I feel that's what took a lot of people out. I see where you're coming from. I've never cared if it's being narrated or not. I personally think that that's just been the process for the entire time. I do think it's interesting because I've talked about this a lot. The manga has an outside narrator, so there is someone who is not in the story that narrates the story, like a Jujutsu Kaisen or a Hunter x Hunter. They took that out with the anime adaptation. They gave Tanjiro a lot of the narration lines. They took out a lot of the narration lines. So I've never been bothered by this. I think, again, I understand where you're coming from, but I don't think that really changes my perspective of the backstory. It's fine that it won anime movie, and it would have been fine if this Chainsaw Man movie won. They're both amazing. I actually agree with this. I would have been a little bit sad if Chainsaw Man won, but I went and saw that movie and really, really enjoyed that movie. I thought it was really well done. I think just the fandom's desire to make everything a war against Demon Slayer, like, One Piece just got a movie announcement and all of them are just like, we're gonna beat Demon Slayer. And it's just like, I don't understand like why, if you hate this show so much, it's on your mind so much. So it kind of soured my experience of it. And a lot of people tell me I shouldn't let the fandoms change my perspective of a story. The problem is I'm so active in fandoms to the point of making a YouTube channel that's really about anime in general. I know I talk mostly about Demon Slayer because that's my hyperfixation, but my enjoyment out of a story does depend on how much enjoyment I have with the fandom. That's just the way I'm built. That's the way I work. And I loved the movie. Like, as a whole, I really enjoyed the Chainsaw Man movie. I thought it was really, really well done. I just didn't like that immediately everyone had to compare it to Demon Slayer because the only similarities between the two were that it was a movie that came out within the same time frame and they're both a part of Shonen Jump. Everything else about them was totally different, so there's no comparison. So I agree, if it had won, I would have been okay with it. I would have been a little bit sad, but it would have been fine. It would have made sense to me. A lot of you are saying you wish Zenitsu got his announcement. I get it. We should have gotten his moment. I agree. Okay, I think this is going to be my last one where I'm not going to dip into manga spoilers. Shinobu could have killed Doma. What bothered me was that after every attack, she would just stand there and wait for him to react instead of injecting him with more poison. She could have kept pressing him with poison to the point he couldn't stand it. Also, if she went for his neck instead of his eye for her first attack, it might have just killed him right there. But I know that wasn't the plan, so I understand why she didn't. I have mixed feelings on this one because the whole like standing there and waiting is a like very common anime trope. Because anime always, since it's, I'm gonna go like super off topic here for a second, and I promise you it'll pay off in the end. Okay, so I am reading the Apothecary Diaries light novels right now, and the source material of the Apothecary Diaries are novels, and they call them light novels. They're full-on novels. They're not light by any means, I guess, for me who doesn't like reading, and these are set up in a way where there's not a ton of dialogue from the characters because it's a novel. It spends a lot more time explaining what's going on via just storytelling rather than dialogue. And I feel like that shows in the anime, even though the anime is an adaptation of the manga, which is an adaptation of the light novels, it still feels like there's a lot less just like exposition and dialogue and a lot more like storytelling through actions. Personally, in my personal experience with watching anime, most of it follows the exact same thing as Demon Slayer does. There's a lot of dialogue between characters. There is a running joke within the fandoms that if characters would just shut up and fight, these fights would go completely differently. So while I agree, sometimes with these fights, I'm like, just stop. I felt the same way when Tanjiro was just kind of letting Akaza, like, punch when he like started to get in touch with Keizo, and instead of Tanjiro like jumping for him, he just punched nothing, but that's just an anime thing. I don't understand why so many people count that against Demon Slayer but then don't count it against One Piece, don't count it against My Hero Academia, don't count it against literally any other shonen. They have these dialogue moments. So I agree, but I also feel like it's just like that's an anime thing. If you don't like that, then watch something that's not anime? I don't know. Like, this is not to say you shouldn't watch anime, commenter. I'm just saying, like, this is just my thought process is manga is a lot of dialogue and anime is usually a one-to-one adaptation of the manga, which just means that these characters stand and talk a lot in, like, every anime I've ever watched. So that's just the way it is. That I don't know. Like, yeah, she could have killed him a lot easier probably if she had just gone for it, but that's not how anime works. That's the way I see it. This is from one of my members, so I want to get through theirs really quick. I do not feel bad for Doma, even after seeing his backstory. To me, I think it was added just to give more information on him, not to be sad. Doma himself doesn't care about his story. I agree. If you love Doma, that's fine. I don't like it when people shove it down my throat that I need to have the same amount of empathy for him as I do for Akaza. I think Doma is, like, supposed to be hated. He does not care about the trauma he experienced. Sure, he experienced trauma, but it's just there as this is why he's crazy, not as feel empathy for him because of that. I think that's the very clear way that was written, so I agree with that. And I think that's totally fine. It is okay to see a character that has experienced trauma, but the way they react to that trauma means you don't have empathy for them. And I think Doma is the perfect example of that. Okay, so the next one I'm going to talk about, I am going to dip into some manga spoilers to discuss my reasoning behind my thoughts on this hot take. So again, if I didn't talk about yours, I'm so sorry. I have 15 minutes left of my lunch break, and I do want to grab some food before I have to clock back in. So I promise you, I'm doing this because this is just the time that I have. But I did really like this hot take and I wanted to talk about it. So now that my anime onlys have left, this hot take is something I didn't particularly get was why Shinobu was getting so frustrated that she couldn't kill Doma with the poisons in her sword when she had planned for him to absorb her anyway. I guess maybe because it made her think all the poison she had been consuming in preparation wouldn't work, but I don't know. So again, this itself is not a manga spoiler, but my answer to this is a manga spoiler. So the reason she's so frustrated is because this is not plan A to be absorbed. Plan A is for the poisons to work. So she really, really did not want to die. Like, she was not, like, this is a common misconception, is that she went into this fight 100% believing that she was going to die. She knew that that might be the only answer, but she was desperately trying to make it so that wasn't the case. She did not want Kanao to lose another person. She did not want the butterfly triplets or Aoi to lose another person. She wanted to be there for them, but she had this like plan B where she knew the possibility that her sword would not work, that she would have to be absorbed in order to kill him. So she's frustrated because she is going into this battle hoping that she can make it out alive. So when it's not working, she's coming to the realization that she's going to have to go with plan B, which is death. So she's not just like, oh, like, I'm gonna sacrifice myself, I'm gonna forget all about Kanao and everyone and do this for revenge. She's doing this because she wants to protect them, but she understands that there is the possibility she will have to give her life to protect them. So this is a common misconception. She is frustrated because she doesn't want to die. She's not there to die. She just has that as a plan B in case she has to do it. And that ends up being what has to happen. And that really sucks, but that's how it was. So there you have it. So with that, I'm going to say the final one. I feel like I've said the final one a lot. I just keep seeing ones I'm like, oh, I want to talk about that, and I have 13 minutes. So let's do a couple more. Infinity Castle runs circles around Chainsaw Man Reze. OST, followable action, story, content, presentation were all superb. I really like Chainsaw Man. I don't know if it runs circles around it. I do think the OST was better. I think Chainsaw Man had some really beautiful moments, but in general, the whole soundtrack of Demon Slayer gave me chills, while just slight moments of Chainsaw Man gave me chills. There was like some really good storytelling in Chainsaw Man that is like, I don't know, I think maybe they're more the same. Presentation, all superb. So yeah, I like agree with this, but also I don't think they ran circles around them, but I do think Demon Slayer was better, I guess. I think Tanjiro and Kokushibo should have met. No. The story's never been about like the, oh, that's so cool that Tanjiro met with Kokushibo because Kokushibo was killing all the Sunbreathers and Tanjiro's a Sunbreather. The story has always been about the character connections. Tanjiro had a connection with Akaza that he does not have with Kokushibo, so it makes way more sense for Tanjiro to fight Akaza and for like Gyome, who's the strongest Hashira, to fight the strongest Upper Moon. I think that thematically for the story itself, that is exactly how it should have gone. While I agree it would have been cool, I don't think that the story would have been better if it had been written that way. In fact, I think I prefer that Tanjiro fought Akaza, personally. And I think that's where I'm gonna end the video. I think my final thoughts are, I think a lot of people just mix up what a preference is to an actual critique of a story. I think there are plenty of critiques that are very reasonable critiques of Demon Slayer. In fact, I talked about some of them in my video. I think that Demon Slayer deserves the love that it gets, but I also think that some of the critiques are reasonable, but I also think some of the critiques are just, you have a preference that's different from how it was written, and no author can write a story that appeals to every single person's preference. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the, well, I say this, and this would have been better. Well, not necessarily. That's how it would have been better for you, but it might not have been better for this person, or this person, or this person, and most importantly, for the author. So I think that it's really important. It is okay to have conversations of critique. I think it's really, really smart, and I think it shows that you can have like a nuanced take on something that you love. But I think it's also important to know when those critiques are just preference and when those critiques are just like, like, it's okay. You're okay to have this. That doesn't mean that this makes the show worse. It just means that for you, it could have been better, and that's okay. So, just a reminder for everyone when it comes to hot takes and just in general, like saying negative things about something, is a lot of work went into this, and I think that it's important to be okay with critiquing while also keeping it respectful, and I hope that's what I did in this video. So just a reminder, I guess I'm closing this out as a reminder to say, if you disagree with anything that I said or anything that the commenters said in this video, feel free to comment, but keep your comment respectful. I feel like that's something that a lot of people for some reason can't do, is you see something that you disagree with and you're like seeing red immediately. And I'm like this sometimes. The moment I see someone say they dislike something about Demon Slayer, I'm like, oh. And then I have to like sit there and be like, you know what? Everyone has a preference. Everyone feels a little bit different. We all love different things and that sort of thing. If someone doesn't love Demon Slayer, then someone doesn't love Demon Slayer. I do have an issue when they think the fact that they don't love Demon Slayer means that it's bad. That's when I start going, hey, shut up. Anyway, so I hope you all understand where I'm coming from with some of the critiques of your hot takes, some of my critiques of Demon Slayer, because I think those are good conversations to have, but it is also very important to note that it is just preference that I'm talking about. So that's gonna be it for today's video. If you liked it, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment your thoughts, and I will see you all on Saturday for my third and final part of breaking down the movie. Mate!